The desert wind carried a dry whisper across the old mission grounds. The kind of whisper that made people glance over their shoulders even when they were sure they were alone, moved through the palms, brushed against the cracked adobe walls, and wrapped itself around the young woman standing in the center of the courtyard with her wrists pressed tightly together. Her name was Araya, and even in her silence, she looked like someone trying not to break in front of the world. Her dress was worn, her face pale. Her eyes held the kind of tiredness that comes from years of trying to prove her worth to people determined not to see it. She had married into a proud ranch family, hoping for peace, hoping for warmth, hoping for a future. Instead, she found herself in chains of a different kind, bound not by iron but by the hard judgment of those who believed a woman had only one purpose. Beside her stood the one who called herself her owner now, sharp-faced older woman dressed in black, pointing with the fury of someone who believed anger gave them power. This was the mother-in-law who had raised a son into a man who could not stand up for his own wife, a woman who cared more for appearances than hearts. She had convinced the town that Araya was unfit, faulty, cursed even, because she had not produced a child in the first year of her marriage. And in a cruel corner of the world where gossip held more truth than evidence, people listened. Old woman saw Araya as nothing more than a burden, and now, without shame, she treated her like something to be rid of. The crowd around them shifted nervously, avoiding Araya's eyes. No one stepped forward to defend her. No one questioned the price scribbled on the wooden sign hanging from her neck. It was the kind of scene that made even the bravest men look away, because stepping in meant inviting conflict with a powerful family. It meant being marked as someone who interfered. They stayed silent while Araya stood alone, trying to hold her shaking hands still. At the edge of the courtyard stood a man who did not belong to this place, at least not in the way the others did. His presence was striking. He was tall, strong, and carried the calm of someone who had seen danger and learned to walk through it without fear. His skin was bronzed by sun, his long dark hair tied back with simple leather. A necklace of carved bone rested against his chest, each piece a story of survival. This was Rego, an Apache father raising twin children after losing his wife to illness the year before. The people of this town looked at him with suspicion, whispering warnings about his kind, but he was used to eyes filled with doubt. He was not used to was watching a woman stand alone while everyone else justified their silence. He had come to the mission that morning only to trade for supplies, but the sight before him froze him in place, not the mother-in-law shouting insults, not the men turning their backs. It was the expression on Araya's face that held him. She did not look defeated. She looked exhausted, as if she had been holding on too long and was now teetering on the edge of letting go. It stirred something inside him, something protective, something familiar. He had seen that look once before, on the face of his own sister, the day she had been pushed from her home by people who claimed she did not belong. Araya did not notice him at first. Her eyes stayed on the ground as the older woman barked at her, calling her useless, calling her a disappointment, calling her a burden no ranch could carry. Araya had heard those words for months from the same mouth. But today they carried a different weight. Today, they were meant to justify a sale. Rego stepped forward, slow and calm, the way he approached wild mustangs when he did not want to startle them. His shadow stretched beside Araya's feet, and only then did she lift her head. Her breath caught when she saw him. He did not glare at her, or judge her, or avoid her like the others. His eyes held steady, steady in a way that made her feel seen instead of shamed. The mother-in-law turned sharply when she noticed him, her expression shifting to irritation. "This is none of your concern," she snapped, waving her hand as if brushing away dust. "She is being sold to lighten the burden on our family. Step aside." Rego did not move. His voice, when he spoke, was low but firm, a simple tone that carried more power than the old woman's shouts. "A person is not a burden." His words hung in the air, startling the crowd. No one expected him to interfere. No one expected him to speak with such calm certainty. Araya felt her breath tremble, not from fear, but from something like relief, faint and confusing. The older woman narrowed her eyes. "You think you know better than her own family?" She hissed. "She cannot give children. We have no use for a woman who cannot continue our name." Raya clenched her hands, fighting back tears. She had heard the whispering, the blame, the cruel certainty. Yet she had never been examined by a doctor. She had never been given a chance. No one cared for the truth, only the accusation. Rego glanced at her briefly. She looked small beside the wrath of her mother-in-law. But there was something in her posture, something in her jaw that hinted she was stronger than she appeared. He had seen women in his tribe fight storms and loss with that same kind of quiet endurance. The mother-in-law continued her tirade, demanding someone offer a coin, any coin, as if Araya's value were less than a tool in a shed. But the crowd remained hesitant. Buying a human being, even here, even under pressure, left a bitter taste. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Rego's twins appeared from behind him, peeking around his legs. Two small faces, curious but cautious, watched Araya. They had lost their mother only months ago and had grown wary of strangers. But something about Araya made them pause. Maybe it was the softness in her features, maybe the grief they recognized in her eyes. Whatever it was, the boy stepped closer, reaching out a tiny hand toward her. Araya froze. No adult had touched her gently in so long that the simple gesture from a child nearly unraveled her. The mother-in-law bristled. "Keep your brats away from her," she snapped at Rego. Rego's gaze sharpened. "My children are not brats, and your anger does not make you right." A gasp moved through the crowd. The older woman's face twisted with outrage. Araya looked between them, fear tightening in her chest. She did not want violence. She did not want to be the reason trouble started. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell Rego not to get involved. But the words tangled in her throat. Rego stepped closer to her, not touching, simply placing himself at her side. The gesture alone shifted the air in the courtyard. It felt like a shield rising between her and the world. The mother-in-law spat her final words. "Take her then if you're so eager, but remember this. She will bring you nothing but trouble. A barren woman is a curse." The harsh sentence struck Araya like a blow, forcing her to fold her hands tighter to keep them from shaking. Shame washed through her, but before it could settle, Rego answered with quiet certainty. "A woman is not cursed for what she cannot control," he said. "Sometimes the curse is the way others treat her." For the first time in months, Araya felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. Rego reached into the small leather pouch tied to his belt and pulled out enough coin to satisfy the mother-in-law's greedy demand. The older woman snatched it without gratitude, turning her back and walking away with triumph stiffening her steps. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring, unsure whether they had witnessed a rescue or the beginning of another problem. Araya stared at Rego, unable to fully understand why a stranger would step into her misery. She lowered her gaze, unsure what. To say unsure what came next, unsure if she had just been saved or simply traded. Rego studied her quietly, sensing her uncertainty. "You are safe now," he said softly. But Araya did not feel safe, not yet, because safety meant trust, and trust was something she had forgotten how to offer. She looked at his twin children, standing beside him, then back at him, wondering what kind of life he expected from her. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the mission courtyard. The wind shifted again, carrying new tension, new questions, new possibilities, and as Rego motioned for her to follow him away from the place where her dignity had been, torn apart, Araya realized her life was no longer the one she had known. Something had changed, something deep and uncertain, and she could feel it rising around her like a storm waiting to break. She walked beside him, her pulse racing. Her thoughts tangled between fear and hope, because she had just been taken in by a man the whole town feared, and somewhere beyond the gate, something was waiting for her that neither of them could yet see. The walk away from the mission felt longer than the path Araya had taken when she first married into her husband's family. Back then she had arrived with hope in her heart, believing she would build a future, believing she would be welcomed. Now she walked with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, feeling the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her shoulders. Rego moved a few steps ahead, his stride calm, steady, and unbothered by the stares that followed them. His twins walked close to him, one holding onto the fringe of his belt, the other stepping lightly as if memorizing the way their father walked. Araya kept glancing at the children, Their expressions were curious, but not unfriendly. The boy Kinto had bright, observant eyes that missed nothing. The girl Lahana looked gentler, studying Araya with a softness that made her throat tighten. They were young, not more than 5 or 6, and they carried a maturity that came from loss and living close to the harsh edges of the world. Araya wondered what kind of father Rego was, what kind of life they lived, what kind of home she was being taken to. But she did not ask. She was too afraid of sounding ungrateful, too unsure if she even had the right to speak. Rego noticed her hesitation. His voice came low, steady, without pressure. "You may walk beside us," he said, not looking back. "You do not have to trail behind." She swallowed hard and nodded, though she did not speed up immediately. Instead, she waited until the twins glanced back at her, their small footsteps slowing. Only then did she step forward until she walked between the children. Aware of how strange she must look with her hands knotted together and her eyes fixed on the road. The mission faded behind them as they followed a path that led toward the open. The desert stretched wide, dotted with mesquite, sand, and distant hills rising under the warm sun. It was beautiful in a lonely way, and Araya felt its silence settle around her. She had lived most of her life in ranch houses or towns, always close to people's voices. This landscape felt different, vast, honest, a place that did not hide its truths. After several minutes, Rego slowed his pace until he walked at her side. She felt her pulse quicken, unsure what he wanted to say. He did not turn to her, but his tone carried a quiet thoughtfulness. "You came to this town with hope," he said, as if reading the story written on her face, "and it was taken from you." Araya blinked fast. She did not know how he could say the exact thing she had been thinking. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "I tried to be what they wanted," she whispered. "But no matter what I did, they saw me as a failure." Rego nodded with understanding. "Some people only know how to measure worth in one way." Shh. She lowered her eyes. "They said I was broken." The wind shifted, lifting strands of her hair across her cheek. Rego's expression did not change, but something in his posture hardened. "You were not broken," he said. "You were judged unfairly." Kinto reached for her hand, surprising her. She looked down, startled by the small gesture, but his fingers wrapped around hers with simple trust. It was the first warm touch she had felt in so long that her eyes burned. She squeezed his hand gently, afraid to scare him, afraid to let go. They walked farther, the air growing quieter as the town faded behind them. Araya sensed the children relaxing, as if they were returning to a place that felt more familiar. She could hear birds calling in the distance, the rustle of dry leaves, the faint crunch of footsteps on sand. With each step, the mission courtyard felt farther away, but so did the life she had known. She wondered what she was now. A guest? A burden? A responsibility Rego had taken on to keep her from further suffering. The silence stretched until Araya gathered the courage to ask the question weighing on her. "Why did you help me?" Rego breathed in deeply before answering. "Because I have seen enough cruelty, and enough lies told about people who did nothing wrong." His gaze remained on the path ahead. "I know what it feels like to lose family. I know what it feels like to be judged for things no one understands." Rhea studied his face. She could see the faint lines of grief etched near his eyes, the quiet heaviness of someone carrying memories that did not fade easily. She had heard rumors in the town about an Apache man who had lost his wife, raising his twins alone in the wilderness. Many spoke with fear, some with disdain, but none with truth. Araya now stood close enough to see the humanity in his expression, not the stories others had painted. They passed a small cluster of trees and a narrow stream, where the twins stopped to splash their hands in the cool water. Rego let them play for a moment, kneeling beside them to rinse dust from their faces. Araya watched quietly, amazed at the gentleness in his movements. He wiped Kinto's cheek with a calm hand, then tied a loose piece of hair behind Lahana's ear with careful patience. The children trusted him completely. She could not stop the question that slipped out. "Do they miss their mother?" Rego paused. His eyes darkened with a sadness that carried deep weight. "Every day," he said. "She was strong, kind, the kind of woman who saw good in places others ignored." He glanced at Araya then, and she felt her breath hitch. But the world took her early. Araya lowered her gaze, feeling as if she had stepped into a memory she had no right to touch. But Rhaego's next words came gentle enough to draw her back. "You remind them of her?" he said. Araya blinked with confusion. "Me, your quiet strength? The way you hold your pain without letting it take your heart." His voice softened further. "Some people are born with a spirit that endures. My children see that." Her chest tightened, partly from the compliment and partly from the fear that she would disappoint them. She had not felt strong in a long time. Most days, she felt like a cracked clay pot, barely holding together. They continued walking until the land began to rise toward a small ridge. As they climbed, the view below widened, revealing a cluster of tall pines and smoke rising in thin trails from what looked like hidden huts. Araya hesitated, unsure if she was ready to walk into a place so unfamiliar. Rhaego stopped beside her, sensing her worry. "This is where we stay," he said. "It is not a large village. Only a few families now. Many moved north. Some did not survive the past year." Araya felt her throat tighten. Loss hung in the air like a quiet shadow. Lahanna slipped her hand into Araya's, guiding her forward with a soft tug. The small gesture steadied her more than Rhaego's words. Children had a way of making fear seem less heavy when they reached the camp. A few women looked up from their work, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Some straightened, whispering to each other. Araya felt her stomach twist. She had gone from unwanted in her old life to uncertain in this new one. A woman with braided hair approached. Older but strong, her expression unreadable. She studied Araya with a slow, careful gaze, then turned to Rhaego. "She came from the town?" she asked. Rhaego nodded. "She was cast out. I would not leave her there." The woman's eyes softened only slightly. "And what does she bring with her?" Araya's breath caught, unsure how to answer, unsure what she had left to offer anyone. Rhaego answered for her. "She brings nothing but herself," he said calmly, "and that is enough." The woman looked at Araya again, longer this time, then nodded once. "Then she may stay. For now." Without another word, she returned to her work, leaving Araya frozen in place. Araya felt exposed, uncertain, and painfully aware of how alone she still was. But Rhaego touched her arm lightly. "Do not fear," he said. "People judge quickly when they do not know the truth. They will see your worth in time." Araya wanted to believe him, but fear still pressed against her thoughts. What if she could not fit in? What if she was seen as a burden here too? What if Rhaego regretted bringing her? As she stood there, the soft sound of footsteps approached. She turned to see a young woman carrying a woven basket. Her gaze was curious, but kind. She offered the basket gently. "For you," she said. "Food for the night?" Araya accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. The young woman smiled faintly. New beginnings are difficult, but they can grow strong. Araya held the basket close, feeling a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time. Not quite hope, but close. Rhaego guided her toward a small shelter built near a tree line. "You will stay here," he said, "close to my home, so the children can find you easily." Araya stepped inside the shelter. It smelled of earth, wood, and dried herbs. Simple, but safe. Safe in a way the ranch house had never been. As she turned back toward Rhaego, she saw him pause at the entrance, looking at her with an expression she could not read. Protective, thoughtful, burdened with his own worries. "Rest for now," he said. "Tomorrow, the real work begins." Araya nodded, though the words sent a shiver through her. She watched him walk away to his own home, twins running to him eagerly. She sat slowly on the woven mat inside the shelter, feeling night settle around her. The desert wind rattled the branches. Voices murmured softly from nearby huts. The fire crackled low. She realized then that she had stepped into a life she did not understand, surrounded by people who did not know her story. And somewhere among them, danger, judgment, and secrets waited. The introduction of a new life did not mean the end of her suffering. It only meant the next storm had not yet revealed itself. The first morning in the camp came with a pale sky. and a chill that crept into Araya's bones. She woke to the sounds of crackling fire, soft voices, and the distant whinny of horses. For a moment she forgot where she was and reached for the blanket that used to lie at the foot of her old bed on the ranch. Her fingers met woven reeds instead. The memory of the mission courtyard slammed back into her chest, followed by the image of Rego standing between her and her mother-in-law. She sat up slowly, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Outside, the camp moved with quiet purpose. Women crushed herbs, men checked their horses, and children chased one another in small bursts of laughter. The air held the smell of smoke and sage. Araya hesitated before stepping out of the shelter, feeling as if every pair of eyes would turn her way. Some did. She saw curiosity, caution, and in a few faces, open distrust. She knew that look. She had worn it herself once, when rumors in town spoke of Apache riders passing near the ranch. Now, she was the stranger in their world. The weight of that was heavy. Lahana spotted her first and ran over with a small grin. "You woke," the girl said, as if relieved the new woman had not vanished overnight. Kinto followed more slowly, carrying a wooden toy horse he had carved himself. He handed it to Araya without a word, as if offering a peace sign. The gesture warmed her, even as nerves tangled in her stomach. Rego appeared soon after, his hair damp from the stream, his expression as steady as ever. "You will eat with us," he said. "Then we speak of work." There was no sharpness in his tone, but no softness either. It was practical, like everything about him. They sat by the fire while an older woman handed out bowls of corn and beans. Araya caught the woman's name from the twins' words. They called her Tazra, and she seemed to be the quiet backbone of the small Apache community. Tazra's eyes lingered on Araya for a moment, not unkind but measuring, as if weighing what kind of strength lived in this newcomer. As Araya ate, she listened. She heard the people speak of scarce water, of traders raising prices in town, of soldiers rumored to be moving closer to the region. The old American frontier was always restless. But there was a sharper edge to the conversations now, a sense that the land was tightening around them. Araya realized that Rego's choice to take her in did not just bring a woman from town into their midst. It brought a connection to the ranch world. Two families, like the one that had cast her aside, to all the tangled conflicts growing between settlers and Apache people. After the meal, Rego led her to a small corral near the trees. 3 horses stood within, their ears twitching, their eyes bright. "You know horses?" he said. It was not a question. He had watched the way she looked at them when they passed a herd on the way from town. "My father trained them," she answered. "Before he lost the ranch to debt." Saying it out loud still stung. "I worked alongside him." Rego nodded once. "Then you will help with them here. They are our lifeline. We trade with them. We ride to protect our families. They must trust every hand that touches them." Araya approached the nearest horse, a chestnut mare, with a white blaze down her forehead. She moved slowly, speaking in a low tone, the same way her father had taught her, while working in the dust and heat. The mare snorted, then nudged Araya's palm as if searching for a treat. For the first time since the mission courtyard, Araya felt something like calm. She belonged with horses in a way she had never fully belonged in her husband's stone house. What she did not see was the figure watching from the edge of camp. A lean man with a scar running along his jaw, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. His name was Calder, a tracker who had grown up in these lands and trusted very few who came from the towns. He had lost a brother in a clash with ranch riders years ago, men who had claimed Apache hunters were trespassing on land the tribe had used for generations. Since then, anything that smelled of ranch dust stirred bitterness in him. Seeing a ranch woman walking freely in their camp made that bitterness burn hotter. Later that day, Calder approached Rego near the fire. "You brought her here without speaking to the council first," he said, his tone controlled, but tight. "You know how the elders feel about bringing outsiders into our circle?" Rego met his gaze. "I know how they feel about leaving innocent people to be abused." "Innocent," Calder echoed, the word heavy with doubt. "She comes from a family that profits from our hunger. A ranch family that praised soldiers for pushing us deeper into this dry land. You think she is untouched by that?" She was sold like a mule, Rego replied. Whatever her past, she is cast out now. Cast out can still mean trouble. Calder lowered his voice. The town will not like that an Apache warrior took one of their own. They will twist it. Say you stole her. They will come with guns and paper orders. The army listens to ranch voices more than ours. Rego knew he was not wrong. That fear had already pressed at the edge of his mind. Still, he could not shake the way Araya had looked at the mission. Broken, but not cruel. Abandoned, but not bitter. We are not cowards, Rego said. I will not let fear turn us into the same people who closed their doors in her face. Calder's jaw tightened. Bravery is not the same as recklessness. Tension settled thick between them. Neither man raised his voice, but their disagreement hung in the air for others to feel. Tazra watched from a distance, seeing two strong men pulled between compassion and caution, knowing both came from wounds that had never properly healed. While the men argued near the fire, Araya worked with the horses. She did not hear every word, but she saw the way Calder glanced her way with thinly veiled distrust. She understood what it felt like to be judged with very few facts. Yet she also could not blame him for his suspicion. She had grown up in a world that spoke of Apache raids without ever admitting what settlers had done first. Now, she was standing on the other side of that story, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the camp. Rego showed Araya how to grind herbs Tazra collected from nearby hills. These help with fever, he explained. In pain. When my wife grew weak, Tazra used them to ease her suffering. His voice dropped a notch, the memory raw even now. Araya listened carefully, tracing his movements, learning where each leaf should be placed in the stone bowl. You still speak of her? Araya said softly. It was not meant as a challenge, only an observation. I will speak of her until my own voice is gone, Rego answered. She gave me these children and this purpose. To keep them alive? Araya studied his profile. There was no room for romantic illusions in his expression. He did not look at her the way a man looks at a woman he wishes to charm. Instead, he looked at her like another soul surviving the same rough country. Yet beneath that steady gaze, she sensed a growing conflict. He had opened his home out of conscience, but now he must balance that choice against the safety of his people. That night, Araya sat outside her shelter, watching sparks from the central fire drift into the dark sky. The twins had already fallen asleep. Rego sat a short distance away, speaking in low tones with Tazra. Araya hugged her knees close, listening to the desert sounds. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Crickets answered. The peaceful sounds barely masked the storm building around her. Back in town, the story of her sale was already twisting into something far more dangerous. Her mother-in-law, eager to protect the family's reputation, told everyone who would listen that Araya had run off with an Apache warrior, leaving her husband abandoned and disgraced. She painted herself as a grieving older woman, forced to let go for the sake of her son's honor. The sign around Araya's neck, the coins she had grabbed with greedy fingers, all vanished from the tale. Araya's husband, Roldan, heard the rumors and felt anger rise in him. But not all of it was toward his wife. He knew his mother, knew how easily she twisted truth when it suited her. Yet his pride smarted at the thought that people believed his wife had chosen someone else. The whispers spread like dry brush fire. She preferred an Apache father of twins to her own husband, they said. She betrayed the ranch that fed her. Town deacon, eager to keep peace with the ranchers and fearful of Apache raids, suggested they report to the nearby fort. If an Apache man walks into the mission courtyard and takes a Christian woman, the army must know, he said. If we let it pass, we show weakness. The frontier respects strength. None of them spoke of the sale. None of them admitted that they had watched silently as a woman was traded like livestock. It was easier to believe a kidnapping had taken place. Easier to blame the Apache man than to face their own cowardice. Days passed in the camp. Araya learned to fetch water from the deepest, clearest part of the stream. She helped Tazra prepare poultices for aching joints and bruised shoulders. She taught the twins a simple song her father had hummed while fixing broken fences. And soon their small voices carried the tune through the trees. On the surface, life began to settle into a rhythm. Yet every kindness she received was matched by a question whispering at the back of her mind. How long before someone from town came looking for her? How long before the camp decided she was too great a risk? She saw the way Calder kept his distance, the way he spoke to Rego in tight phrases, the way his eyes flicked toward her whenever talk of patrol riders or soldiers surfaced. One evening, as Araya brushed the chestnut mare under the fading light, Calder approached her at last. His footsteps were silent on the dry ground, his shadow long across the dust. She tensed when she realized he stood only a few paces away. "You handle horses well," he said. There was no warmth in his voice, but no open hostility either. "My father taught me," she answered, keeping her tone neutral. Calder nodded slowly. "Did he also teach you how to watch men ride out and not return because ranchers feared they might cross a fence drawn on a map far from here?" Araya flinched. "I never wished harm on anyone." "Wishing and acting are not the same," Calder replied. "In town, did you ever speak when they mocked us? When they said our lives were worth less than cattle?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Memories of conversations around dinner tables, of quiet nods when someone complained about Apache raids, of her own silence when she had been unsure what to say, rose up like accusing ghosts. "No," she whispered at last. Calder held her gaze. "Then understand why some of us look at you and see danger." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her gripping the brush so tightly her fingers hurt. His words cut deep because they were not entirely unfair. The conflict in this land ran deeper than one woman's suffering. It reached into every story, every loss, every boundary drawn by hands that never lived on the soil they claimed. Araya lay awake that night, listening to the twins' gentle breathing from Rego's shelter nearby. She thought of her old life, of the husband who never defended her, the mother-in-law who used her as a shield against gossip. She thought of Rego, torn between compassion and duty, and of Calder, whose pain hardened into suspicion. She wondered where she truly belonged. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of smoke from far beyond the camp. It was not the clean scent of their own fire. It carried hints of coal and gun oil, the smell of camps near forts and patrol roads. Far out on the dark horizon, small figures moved along a ridge. Riders from the fort, led by a ranch hand who knew the trail to the Apache camp. The town had told their story, and the soldiers believed they rode to retrieve a stolen wife. All the while, Araya slept restlessly, unaware that the conflict of her own heart was about to collide with the larger conflict of the frontier. In a way that would test everyone's courage and loyalty, the wind carried a strange tension into the camp at dawn, as if the desert itself sensed what was coming before any human eye did. Araya woke with her heart beating too fast, a lingering unease wrapping around her like a cold blanket. She stepped outside her shelter and saw Rego standing at the ridgeline, scanning the distant hills with narrowed eyes. His posture was rigid in a way she hadn't seen before, even when Calder challenged him. Kinto and Lahana played quietly nearby, but even their laughter seemed softer. Aware of the shift in the air, Araya approached slowly. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Rego's jaw tightened. "Smoke from more than one fire," he said. "Not ours." Her chest tightened. "Town riders." He didn't answer directly, but his silence was enough. The sun had barely risen, yet his shadow looked longer. Heavier Tatsra came walking toward them with a bundle of herbs strapped to her back. "I saw tracks along the creek," she said. "Fresh, heavy horses. Not ours." Araya's fingers curled against her skirt. She knew what that meant. Soldiers rode heavier horses than Apache families. Ranch hands often followed close behind. The story her mother-in-law spread in town must have reached the fort by now, and Araya knew the military did not question ranch families, especially influential ones. They would take her presence here as proof of the stolen wife rumor. Worse, they would treat Rego as the villain no matter how gently he had acted. She felt a sharp twist in her stomach. "They won't listen to me, will they?" she whispered. Rego finally turned to her, and the honesty in his expression confirmed what she feared. "Not at first," he said. "Maybe not at all." Behind them, Calder emerged from the shade of the pines, his expression grim. "I warned you," he said sharply. They're coming because of her. Raya flinched, but Rego stepped forward with a calm firmness. Blame the people who twist truth, not the woman who suffered by their hands. Calder's eyes flashed. Truth won't matter to men with guns. They see her as one of theirs and us as thieves. Look at her. She wears their clothes. She carries their scent of ranch dust. They won't hear reason. Raya felt heat rise in her face. Not anger, shame. She knew Calder wasn't wrong. Even now, she stood between two worlds, unwanted in one and untrusted in the other. She felt like a burden pulling everyone into danger. Rego's voice softened. She is here now, and she is not alone. Calder's tone sharpened. So we stand and fight? For someone who may bring the army to our door? Araya felt the words like blows. She stepped back, shaking her head. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said quietly. I didn't even know they would come. I didn't think they cared enough to follow. Of course they care, Calder snapped. They care about appearances. About claiming their property. About making sure no Apache man is seen as equal. Quinto ran to Araya and grabbed her hand at that moment, small and warm. It was enough to ground her. She lifted her free hand and touched the top of his hair gently. She could not break down now. Not with children watching. Not with the man who saved her standing firm beside her. Rego raised his hand to silence Calder. We will not scatter in fear, he said. And we will not fight unless we must. But we prepare. Tazra nodded in agreement. The young ones must be hidden. And the horses moved. It divided quickly. Calder and two others moved the horses deeper into the wooded ridge, while Tazra gathered the younger children and led them to a protected hollow. Behind a cluster of boulders, Araya helped gather supplies but felt her hands shaking with every movement. The thought of men from town men she once greeted politely on dusty trading days, coming here with suspicion in their eyes, sent a cold wave through her as they worked. Lahana tugged at Araya's skirt. Don't be scared, she whispered. Father says fear makes shadows look like monsters. Araya knelt and hugged her gently. I'll try to be brave, she said, though her voice wavered. By midday, the sky deepened into a heat-heavy blue. The dust on the horizon thickened, swirling in patterns that meant riders were near. The faint rhythm of hooves rolled across the ground like approaching thunder. Araya recognized that sound. Ranch hands and soldiers rode with a certain weight commanding. Cold rehearsed. She saw Rego step to the center of the clearing, shoulders squared, ready to face whatever came. His calmness gave her a sliver of strength she desperately needed. But Calder's gaze was sharp, scanning the ridge like a hawk. One hand gripping a spear, though, he kept the tip low to avoid provoking anything too early. Araya stood near the edge of the camp, half hidden by a tree, her heart hammered with every approaching hoofbeat. Her mind spun through memories she hadn't touched in years. Her wedding day, her father's tired smile when he walked her down the aisle, her mother-in-law's disappointed look at the end of the first year, the crushing silence that followed her failure to conceive. She had walked away from that life believing she left behind people who hardly cared. She never imagined they would care this much about reclaiming her, or claiming possession of her in the eyes of authorities. The riders came into view at last. A line of soldiers in dust-stained uniforms led by an officer with a rigid posture. Behind them rode 4 ranchmen, and among them, Araya recognized her husband. Rolled in. His face looked tight with worry. But she could not read whether that worry was for her or for his own reputation. The soldiers drew their horses to a halt just before the camp entrance. Dust swirled around them. The officer's eyes swept across the clearing. Resting on Rego with practiced disapproval, Araya's breath caught when she saw Roldan's mother behind the men. Sitting rigid in a wagon, wearing a veil and a face of dramatic grief, she had told the fort she was the victim in all this. Araya felt the weight of new lies settling over her like chains. The officer spoke loudly. We received reports that a woman from town was taken from the mission courtyard by an Apache man. We are here to return her to her proper home. Calder's jaw clenched. Rego stood tall, but calm. She was not taken, he said. She was being sold. I stepped in to stop cruelty. The officer shook his head dismissively. That is not the story we were given. Roldan rode forward then, voice tight. Where's my wife? He asked, avoiding her eyes. We need to take her home. Raya stepped from behind the tree before she could think. Her voice cracked through the silence. I was never taken. Every head turned toward her. She felt her knees weaken but forced herself to remain standing. I was put up for sale. Your mother did it. Everyone saw. And you... ... She swallowed hard. You said nothing. Roldan's face contorted between shame and defensiveness. I don't know what you're saying. Mother said you ran off. She said she lied, Araya said sharply. Her voice trembled, but the truth carried strength. She lied because she cared more about your name than my life. The officer adjusted his reins impatiently. This is not the place for domestic quarrels. The woman belongs with her people. Step aside so she can return. She's with her people, Rego said firmly. Calder lifted his spear slightly. Tazra's eyes narrowed. A cold tension crackled through the air, sharp as lightning. Araya took a step forward, raising her hands. Please, she said, voice raw. Listen, I was not kidnapped. I was abandoned. And these people, Rego's people, took me in when no one else would. The officer snorted. A woman's confusion under distress does not change the facts. You belong to your husband. The word hit her like a punch. Belong rolled in, looked down at his reins. Unable to meet her eyes, Araya felt the ground tilt beneath her. She could see the moment Rego's expression changed. Not anger, not fear. A deep, steady resolve. Before anyone could speak again, another wave of riders appeared over the ridge. Ranch riders, not soldiers. More than she expected. Led by a man she barely recognized at first, her husband's older cousin, known for stirring trouble and pretending he brought justice. His presence meant things were about to turn dangerous. He was the kind of man who believed Apache families should be removed, not reasoned with. He raised his rifle with one hand. We came for the woman, he shouted, and for the ones who dared take her. Calder shifted instantly, spear ready. Rego stepped forward. Quietly positioning himself between Araya and the armed men, the officer shouted for everyone to hold. But ranch riders didn't listen. They spread out, forming a semicircle. The Apache warriors positioned themselves as well, standing in protective silence. No weapons raised yet. The air felt like a held breath ready to explode. Araya's throat tightened as she looked between the two worlds. She had been trapped between 4 months. 2 worlds ready to clash because of her. She wanted to scream, to stop it, to step forward and rip the lies apart before they turned into bloodshed. But the man with the rifle narrowed his eyes at Rego. You stole her, he said. Now you'll pay. Rego didn't flinch. She deserved protection. The rifle lifted slightly, fingers tightening around the trigger. Araya felt her heart crash against her ribs. She grabbed Rego's arm in desperation. No, she whispered. Please don't let this happen because of me. Rego looked down at her, his expression steady and full of something she couldn't name. This is not happening because of you, he said. It is happening because of the lies told about you. The officer finally shouted for everyone to stop, but the cousin already had his sights locked. Araya stepped in front of Rego. The gasp that rippled through both camps froze the air. The rifleman hesitated. Stunned, Raigo grabbed her arm, pulling her slightly back. But she stood her ground. Her voice shook as she spoke, loud enough for all to hear. If you want your truth, she said, then listen to mine. Silence hung in the air, stretched tight as a bowstring. Fingers. Near triggers, eyes watching every movement. The frontier had drawn its line at last, and Araya stood on it, knowing the next moment would decide the fate of everyone she had come to care about. The silence after Araya's words was so sharp, it felt like the whole desert held its breath. Heat rippled across the clearing, dust swirled in slow spirals, and every hand hovered a heartbeat away from violence. Araya stood between the two sides, her palms lifted, her heart pounding fast enough to shake her ribs. She could feel Rego just behind her, one steady hand hovering near her arm, ready to pull her back if danger surged. But she did not step aside. She had run from truth long enough. She would not let fear decide her life again. Her husband's cousin tightened his grip on his rifle. "Move away from him," he growled. "You belong to your own kind." Araya forced the trembling out of her voice. "I don't belong to anyone," she said. "Not you. Not your lies. Not the family that used me to protect their pride. I choose where I stand. And I am standing here." The ranch cousin froze, thrown off by the strength in her tone. Roldan shifted in his saddle, confusion flickering across his face. The officer raised a hand ordering everyone to hold. Even Calder stilled, his spear tip lowering slightly as he watched the woman he had once doubted speak with a fire. He did not expect Araya turned toward the soldiers. "Ask the people who were at the mission that day," she said. "They will tell you the truth. I was sold by my mother-in-law because I could not give her a grandchild fast enough. Rego saved me from being treated like an object." She turned toward Roldan. "You know this? In your heart, you know your mother cared more about how the town spoke of you than how your wife lived." Roldan swallowed hard. His horse shifted beneath him as the heat of the truth pressed in. His eyes darted between Araya, the officer, and the cousin's angry glare. He opened his mouth once, closed it, then finally found the courage that had been buried deep. "Mother lied," he said quietly. "She never wanted Araya in the family. She blamed her for everything. And I didn't stop it." Gasps rippled through the ranch riders. The cousin swung toward Roldan in disbelief. "You fool," he snapped. "You'd shame your family in front of these people." Roldan looked at Araya again. His voice cracked. "I already shamed myself by not defending her." The officer frowned, clearly thrown off by the shifting dynamic. "If she was truly sold, then this is not a kidnapping," he said slowly. "But that doesn't settle everything." Araya stepped closer to the officer. "What more do you need?" "I am here by choice. I want to stay here." The officer hesitated. Soldiers were not used to situations where truth did not fit neatly into their orders. His gaze shifted to the Apache families watching in tense stillness, then to Rego, who stood calm but unyielding. Finally, his eyes returned to Araya. He cleared his throat. "If you say you are not being held against your will, then I have no authority to remove you." The cousin barked out a string of protests, but the officer held up a hand. "Enough. We are not spilling blood over a family dispute." Roldan sagged slightly in his saddle, relief mixing with regret. He looked at Araya, voice soft. "If this is where you truly want to be, then I won't fight you." Araya nodded. It was the first time he had ever given her the freedom to choose. It came too late for their marriage, but it mattered all the same. "Thank you," she said. The cousin scowled. But with the soldiers pulling back, he could not act alone. One by one, the ranch riders lowered their rifles. The officer signaled to his men, and the group slowly turned their horses away from the camp. The cousin threw one last bitter glare at Rego and Araya before trotting off. Within minutes, the dust from their retreat blurred them into the horizon. Only when the last echo of hooves faded did Araya's knees weaken. Rego caught her arm gently, steadying her. Everyone in the camp watched quietly, waiting to see what came next. Araya glanced around, expecting suspicion, tension, or blame. But instead, she saw something different. Respect. Even Calder approached. His hard expression softened by reluctant admiration. "You spoke with courage," he said. "I misjudged you." Araya felt her throat tighten. She had waited so long to be seen as something other than a burden. "Thank you," she whispered. Rego stepped closer, his voice low so only she could hear. "You did not just defend yourself," he said. "You've protected all of us." Araya shook her head. "I only spoke the truth." "Truth is not always spoken with strength," he said. "But you gave it strength." The twins ran to her then, wrapping their arms around her waist. Kinto hugged her tightly, while Lahanna buried her small face against Araya's dress. The warmth of their embrace melted whatever fear remained inside her. She knelt down, pressing a gentle kiss to their hair. "We're safe," murmured. Raigo watched the scene with quiet pride, something warm flickering behind his calm expression. The sunlight caught the edges of his carved necklace, making it glint like a promise. As afternoon softened into evening, the camp slowly returned to normal, but nothing was truly the same. People approached Araya with offerings of food, smiles, and soft words in their language. Tazra wrapped a small beaded bracelet around Araya's wrist. "For strength," she said, "you showed ours today." Araya felt the weight of the bracelet like an honor she wasn't yet sure she deserved. But she also felt herself standing taller, breathing easier, sensing the invisible wall between her and the community thinning. Later, Rhaego walked her to the edge of the stream, where the water flowed clear beneath the setting sun. They stood side by side, the quiet between them gentle rather than strained. Araya watched the current move over smooth stones. She felt lighter, as if the desert wind had carried away the last remnants of the life she once knew. "I didn't know I could be brave," she said softly. Rhaego looked at her with that steady gaze that saw more than she said. "You were always brave," he replied. "You were just never given room to show it." Araya exhaled, her breath trembling. "I didn't think anyone would believe me. Not the soldiers. Not the ranchmen. Not even Roldan." "You believed yourself," Rhaego said. "That is where courage begins." She turned to him then, noticing how the fading light softened the edges of his strong features. "You protected me," she whispered. "I helped you stand," he corrected gently. "You protected yourself." For a moment, the only sound was the stream. Araya felt something inside her settle, a quiet peace that came not from being rescued, but from choosing her own path. The twins ran toward them, breaking the silence with laughter. Kinto held a small flower he had picked, and he wedged himself between them to place it in Araya's hand. "You stay with us?" he asked in a small voice. Araya touched his cheek. "If you want me to," she said. Lahanna grabbed her other hand. "We want you," she said shyly. Rhaego's expression softened in a way she had never seen before. The desert was vast, the world uncertain. But this small moment felt like the heart of something new. Araya knelt to hug the children. "Then I'm staying," she said. "If your father agrees." When she rose, Rhaego was standing close, his voice calm but full of meaning. "You have a home here," he said. "Not out of obligation. Because we want you here. All of us." Araya felt her eyes sting, but this time not from pain. From gratitude. From something that felt like belonging. Night settled gently over the camp, fires crackling under a blanket of stars. The sound of flutes and soft drums drifted through the air as families gathered to give thanks for safety. Araya sat beside Rhaego and the twins, feeling warmth spreading through her in waves. The fear of the morning felt like a memory from another lifetime. Tazra approached with bowls of food, smiling at Araya. A woman's spirit finds its place when she stops listening to those who tried to shape her. "Do," she said. "You found yours?" Araya smiled back, feeling the truth of those words settle deep in her bones. When the twins fell asleep against Araya's lap, Rhaego draped a light blanket over them and lowered his voice. "Your life was taken from you once," he said. "But now you shape your own future. No one can steal that from you again." Araya looked at the sleeping children, then at the man who had stood for her when no one else had. "I never knew a home could look like this," she said. Rhaego reached for her hand. Gently, respectfully, as if giving her room to pull away if she wished. She didn't. Her fingers curled around his, under the desert sky. With the whispers of the fire warming the night, Araya felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope, not the fragile hope she carried into her old marriage. Not the desperate hope she held in the mission courtyard. A grounded hope. A chosen hope. One built on truth, respect, and the strength she had rediscovered. Her old life had taken her voice. Her new one returned it. And with Rhaego and the twins beside her, she knew her story would no longer be defined by what she lacked, but by the powerful home she had found in the heart of the frontier, a home where she was wanted, a home where she was free, a home where love would one day grow as naturally as the wind that carried her there.